Okay, so good evening all. I hope you can all hear me. Please, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, please, can you hear me? Are you with me? Okay, excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think as of yesterday, we have started discussing on the general concept of carbohydrate chemistry. So actually for today's lecture, I'm going to focus more on answering questions. So we are going to answer questions, and I hope you are ready. And that is the importance of sending you all those videos. So the importance of this live interaction is for you to be able to understand the videos that you watch. So I'm now going to share a question for you, and we are going to answer them together. Okay, so let me share the question. So these are the questions that we are going to answer. So let me start with question 1. Carbohydrates are A, polyhydroxyaldehydes and phenols. B, polyhydroxyketones. C, polyhydroxyketones and phenol. D, polyhydroxyphenol and alcohols. So please, which one is the answer here? Okay, Yusuf, is it Yusuf Kodra? Said the answer is B. Excellent. The answer is B. And I think if you could remember yesterday, we discussed that carbohydrate is a polyhydroxyaldehyde and ketones. So it is actually made up of two major functional groups, aldehydes. It's made up of aldehyde and ketones. They are called carbonyl compound because they all have carbon to oxygen double bond. So let me ask another question. So if I now have, let's say, carbon to oxygen double bond, and I have free hydrogen here, which one is this? Ketones or aldehydes? Is this ketones or aldehydes? Is this ketones or aldehydes? Look at it very well. Is this a ketones or aldehydes? No, check very well. So this one, some of you said it is ketone. Are you sure it's ketone? Look at it very well. Is this a ketone or aldehydes? So the truth is that yesterday I told you whenever you have, okay, now, whenever you have a carbon here bearing the free hydrogen, it means that this is aldehyde, or you can call it alkanal. So this is alkanal because of this free hydrogen that attached to this carbon. So now, what do you call the carbon that bonds to oxygen double bond? When you have a carbon form a double bond with oxygen. The carbon that double bond with oxygen is called what? What do you call this type of carbon? So we agree that this is aldehyde, or you can call it alkanal. It is alkanal because it has a free hydrogen attached to this carbon. That is the carbon that is bearing the oxygen double bond. So now the question is, the carbon that is bearing the hydrogen, sorry, the carbon that form oxygen double bond, that is carbon to oxygen double bond, is called what? Excellent, Idara Friday. You are always on point. So this is called carbonyl carbon. So any compound that have carbon to oxygen double bond, it is called carbonyl carbon. So it means that what are the examples of compounds that have that we call them carbonyl compound? Aldehyde is an example of carbonyl compound. We have ketones is also another examples of carbonyl compound. So now my question is, who can give me examples of another group of organic compounds that have carbonyl carbon? Apart from the aldehyde and ketones, assuming now you are asked to bring another examples of carbonyl carbon, sorry, carbonyl compounds. Apart from aldehydes and ketones, which one are you going to give? So apart from aldehydes and ketones, we also have amines. Amines are also examples of carbonyl compound. We have alkanoic acid, alkanoic acid is an example of carbonyl compound. Apart from the alkanoic acid, we have also amides. Amides are also examples of carbonyl compound. Yes, so all these are examples of carbonyl compound in organic chemistry. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to the question again. So as I think you have answered the question correctly. So as we can see, carbohydrate are polyhydroxyaldehydes and ketones. So who can give me examples of one carbohydrate? Examples of one carbohydrate. Who can give examples of a carbohydrate, please? Who can give examples of a carbohydrate? Yes, esters also. Angela Ebong, you are also correct. Esters is also another example of carbonyl compound. So now my question is, who can give me examples of carbohydrates? Examples of carbohydrates. One of the examples of carbohydrates, okay, monosaccharides, like what? Like what? Monosaccharides, like what? We have many monosaccharides, like what? Mention. Excellent, glucose. So if you look at glucose, ladies and gentlemen, glucose is like this. We are now going to have something like this. So please, ladies and gentlemen, look at this very well. This is glucose. And now from here, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, this is glucose. This is glucose. So please, from here, who can tell me what is the functional group? What is the functional group of glucose? What is the functional group of glucose? What is the examples of functional group of glucose? Look at it. What is the functional group of glucose? What is the functional group of glucose, please? Functional group of glucose. I said, what is the examples of functional group of glucose? I need answer. Excellent. So the functional group of glucose is aldehyde, because look at the carbonyl carbon, it has free hydrogen. So that means glucose has aldehyde functional group. Okay, now let me look at another example. Let's say I have something like this. I hope you are seeing. So let's say I have something like this. And then I have now something here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I now have 6. So from here, we now have OH here, OH, OH, and then we also have another. Okay, this one is hydrogen, and this one is OH, and this one is free hydrogen, and this one is OH, this one is hydrogen and hydrogen. So now look at it here. Who can tell me which carbohydrate is this? Which carbohydrate is this, please? Which carbohydrate is this? This is glucose, and this is what? Excellent, Adiola Suliet. So this is fructose. This is fructose. So you see here, we have glucose, and here we have fructose. So what is the functional group of fructose, please, ladies and gentlemen? Look at the fructose. What is the functional group of fructose? What is the functional group of fructose, please? Look at it very well. What is the functional group of fructose? What is the functional group of fructose? Excellent. It is ketone. So look at it now. Now I want you to help me count the number of carbon. How many? This is glucose. So now I want you to help me to count how many carbons do we have in glucose. How many carbons do we have in glucose, please? How many carbons do we have in glucose? Do you count it? If you count it, no, it's 6. So we have 6 carbon. Then now, I have 6 carbon. Then how many hydrogen? How many hydrogen do we have? How many hydrogen do we have? We have 6 carbon and how many hydrogen? Excellent. I have 12 hydrogen. Then count. How many oxygen do we have? How many oxygen do we have? Oxygen. How many oxygen? Yes, we have 6 oxygen. And then now, let's come back to fructose. How many carbon do we have in fructose? How many carbon do we have in fructose? How many carbon do we have in fructose? How many carbon do we have in fructose, please? Excellent. Then how many hydrogen do we have in fructose? How many hydrogen do we have in fructose? How many hydrogen do we have in fructose? Hydrogen in fructose. Excellent. We have 12. Then how many oxygen? How many oxygen do we have? How many oxygen? Yes, 12 hydrogen. Then how many oxygen? Excellent. So we have 6 oxygen. So now, in chemistry, this is what you call molecular formula. This is what you call molecular formula. So this is molecular formula of fructose. And this is molecular formula of glucose. This is molecular formula of glucose. molecular formula of glucose. This is molecular formula of glucose. So now, ladies and gentlemen, question now is that if you look at the glucose here and the fructose, their molecular formula is the same. So whenever you have a compound that have the same molecular formula, but if you look at the fructose and glucose structurally, they are not the same. Glucose and fructose, when you consider the structure of glucose and fructose is not the same, but they have the same number of carbon, the same number of hydrogen, and the same number of oxygen. So what do we call that phenomenon? What do the same molecular formula but different structure? What do you call that? Please, what do you call that when you have a compound that have the same molecular formula but different structure? What do we call that? Excellent, excellent, Blessing Chinedu. It is called isomerism. It's called isomerism. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, what I want you to understand in carbohydrates, as we said, carbohydrate is a fully hydroxyaldehyde or ketones. So the word polyhydroxy, it means they have polyhydroxy, it means many OH. So if you look at the glucose here, it has many OH. It has many OH. Fructose also, it has many OH. So that is why it is called, the OH means hydroxy. Whenever you see OH, it means hydroxy. Hydroxy. So because the OH here, like here we have 1, we have 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So because they are more than 1 and they are even more than 2, so that is why they are called polyhydroxy. So like in the case of fructose, it is polyhydroxy ketone. It is polyhydroxy ketone. And in the case of glucose, it is polyhydroxy aldehydes. It is called polyhydroxy aldehydes and polyhydroxy ketone. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you understand this. So isomerism is when you have a compound that but different structure. That is what you call isomerism. So let's go to the next question. Let's go to the next question. So you said that question 1, the answer to question 1 is option B. So now let's go to question 2. So the structural isomers, the structural polysaccharides include A, cellulose, hemicellulose, we have cellulose, hemicellulose, and chitin. Then B, we have cellulose, we have starch, and then we have chitin. C, we have cellulose, we have starch, we have glycogen, and then D, we have cellulose, we have glycogen, and then we have chitin. So please, what is the answer to this question? Please, are you seeing the question? So some are saying B, sorry, some are saying C, and some are saying B. So please, what is the correct answer? What is the correct answer? No, C is not the correct answer. We said structural polysaccharide. The question says structural, structural, structural poly. The question says structural polysaccharide. The, the question says polysaccharides. So what is the answer? Okay, someone said D. No. Actually, polysaccharide is divided into two based on their function. We have structural polysaccharides, and then we have storage polysaccharides. So you can classify polysaccharides on this basis. So polysaccharides, you can split them on this basis. We have structural polysaccharides, and then we have storage polysaccharides. What are structural polysaccharides? Structural polysaccharides, there are polysaccharides that are important in maintaining the structure and the architecture of a living organism. So like it's like they are skeletal polysaccharides. They are like the skeletal polysaccharide. What they are doing is to protect the structure of a tissue or of a cell. So that is structural polysaccharides. And then we have storage polysaccharides. So when we say storage polysaccharides, they are polysaccharides that we consider them or that we call them as a polysaccharide that serve as a storage form of energy. Like for example, now, if you take the glucose, or it is in the amount, it's reached the amount that's it is more than your body demand. So remember, the glucose will be sent to the liver and converted into a glycogen. So that is why glycogen it is considered as a storage form of energy. So we have glycogen is a stored form of carbohydrate. Glycogen in the liver, we store glycogen. And let me just give this example, ladies and gentlemen. When you take carbohydrates and you take large amount of carbohydrate, so the amount of the carbohydrate that is needed at that time to produce energy will be utilized in the form of glucose, and then it will enter glycolysis. It will enter glycolysis. So what will happen? The excess carbohydrates will be stored in the liver in the glycogen. So it will store in the liver in the form of glycogen. Do you understand? So examples of the storage polysaccharides, we have glycogen which is stored in the liver of animal. So if you ask, ladies and gentlemen, this is some kind of the questions that might probably ask in the examination, that you may be asked to give the examples of the storage form of carbohydrates. line network. So, sorry, actually, it's a network issue. So, the storage form of carbohydrate, number one, we have glycogen, which is stored in the liver cells of animals. So now the next one, another examples of storage form of carbohydrate is starch. Starch is also another examples of carbohydrates in the storage form. So therefore, examples of the stored carbohydrate, we have starch usually in plant. So this is the storage form of carbohydrate in plant cells. We also have hemicellulose. Sorry. So these are the two examples of the storage form of carbohydrate. That is the stored form of carbohydrates that provide energy in our body. Then the next one, we have carbohydrates that produce or that are important in structural support. Like for example, we have cellulose. We have cellulose. So example of structural polysaccharide, we have cellulose. So a cellulose is an example of a polysaccharide that is important in maintaining or in supporting the structure of plant cell. Remember, in plant we have cell wall. So the carbohydrate that provide the rigidity of the plant cell is cellulose. And then another examples of the structural polysaccharide that provide structural support apart from cellulose, we have also, this is one. And then number two, another form of carbohydrates that provide structural support, we also have hemicellulose. Hemicellulose, they are all found on the plant cell wall. And then number three, another examples of polysaccharide that provide structural support, we have chitin. So chitin is usually found in insects, and it also provides structural support. So we have three carbohydrates that provide structural support. So structural carbohydrate or structural polysaccharide, we have cellulose, we have hemicellulose, and we have chitin. So cellulose is found in plants, is found in plant cell wall. Hemicellulose is also chitin is found in insect. So let me share, let me actually share the question again so that you can see what will be the correct answer. So ladies and gentlemen, look at it. The structural polysaccharide includes A, as we can see, we have, as we can see, we have cellulose, hemicellulose, and chitin. B, we have cellulose, starch, and chitin. C, we have cellulose, starch, and glycogen. We have option D, cellulose, glycogen, and chitin. So now from this, which one is correct? Which one is correct? So you now understand that polysaccharides can be further be divided into structural and the storage polysaccharide. So as you can see, the structural polysaccharide, we have cellulose, hemicellulose, and chitin, and then the storage polysaccharide, we have glycogen and we have starch. So let's look at another question. So we have now question 3. So you see question 3, the nutritional polysaccharides. Which of the polysaccharides are nutritious in our body? We have starch and glycogen, we have starch and chitin, we have starch and cellulose, we have starch and glucose. So what is the answer for question 3? Question 3, what is the answer? So I'm seeing you are writing AAA. So this AA, is it for question 3. So if you are answering question 3, just write 3. So 3 is what? So you write, if 3 is A, then you write 3A. If it is D, you write 3D. If it is B, you write 3B. So what is the answer to question 3? What is the answer? Okay. So some are saying 3 is B, some are saying 3 is A. So you see, you have to even, so from there, you know that it is polysaccharide. So those of you that are saying D, starch and glucose, is glucose polysaccharide? No, glucose is monosaccharide. So you should even forget about that. Glucose is monosaccharide. So therefore, question 3A, forget about 3D. D is not the answer, because the glucose there disqualify it. The glucose there disqualify it. So from the video, storage polysaccharide are almost no. Storage carbohydrates, these amylose and amylopectin are examples of starch. So question 3 is not D. The correct answer is A. So the correct answer for question 3 is A, because the question says polysaccharide. So both the starch and glycogen are important in producing glucose. So they can produce glucose in the body. Yes, amylose and amylopectin are examples of starch. So now, ladies and gentlemen, the answer for question 3 is A. So now let's move to question 4. So the smallest carbohydrate are trioses. Which of the following is a triose? A, we have glucose. B, we have ribulose. C, we have ribose. And D, we have glyceraldehyde. So please, for question 4, which one is the answer? The smallest carbohydrates are trioses. So which of the following is a triose? Question 4. Question 4. What is the answer? Please, you should be writing the number of the questions and the answer. So question 4 is what? 4, is it 4A? Is it 4B? Is it 4C? Is it 4D? What is the answer? Okay, Miracle says the answer is D. Okay. Excellent. So the answer is D. Question 4. Okay, you can see the screen, so let me share it again. So now look at the question 4. So can you now see the slides? Can you see the slides now? Excellent. So the answer is D. Because the smallest carbohydrate that we have is trioses. That is those, because one thing that I want you to understand, monosaccharides, they are classified based on the number of carbon. So you can classify them based on number of carbon. We have trioses, we have tetroses, we have trioses, we have pentoses, and we have hexoses, we have ceduloheptulose. So when we say it, for example, let's say triose, that is those that contain 3 carbon. And examples of trioses, that is those that contain 3 carbon. We have one, we have glyceraldehyde. We have glyceraldehyde. is an examples of carbohydrate that contain only 3 carbon. And then apart from tetrose glyceraldehyde, we also have dihydroxyacetone. So all these are carbohydrates that contain 3 carbon. So they are carbohydrates that contain 3 carbon. And then we have tetroses. That is those that contain 4 carbon. And we have pentoses, those that contain 5 carbon, like ribose or deoxyribose sugar. And then we have hexoses, that is those that contain 6 carbon. Then we have ceduloheptulose, those that contain 7. So glyceraldehyde and dihydroxyacetone, they are the smallest carbohydrate. There is no any carbohydrate that is containing 2 carbon. There is no any carbohydrate that contain only 1 carbon. So the smallest carbohydrates are those that contain 3 carbon, and we have glyceraldehyde, and then we have dihydroxyacetone phosphate. So the answer to this is glyceraldehyde, which is D. So now let's look at question 5. The compound having the same structural formula but differing in spatial configuration are known as A. Can you see this? Can you see the question now? This question 5. The compound having the same structural formula but different spatial configuration are known as A. Stereoisomers, B. Epimers, C. Anomers, D. Optical isomers. So what is the answer to this? What is the answer to question 5? A compound having the same structural formula but different or different in spatial configuration is known as A. Stereoisomers, B. Epimers, C. Anomers, D. Optical isomers. So the correct answer is stereoisomers. Stereoisomers. I'm happy because the way some of you are answering my questions indicates that you are really watching the video. So the correct answer is stereoisomers. So what is stereoisomers? Stereoisomers are compounds that have, so when you say stereoisomers are compounds that have the same molecular formula but different spatial arrangement. They have the same molecular formula but different spatial arrangement of the atoms. And this stereoisomers is usually applied when a compound is having asymmetric carbon. Asymmetric carbon. So it is actually examples of the compound that undergo stereoisomerism. It applies when you have a compound that have the same molecular formula but different structure, but mostly in a compound that have asymmetric carbon. What is asymmetric carbon? The other name for asymmetric carbon is called chiral carbon. You can call it chiral carbon, or you can call it stereogenic. You can call it stereogenic carbon. You can call it chiral carbon, or you can call it asymmetric carbon. So what is a chiral carbon? A chiral carbon is a carbon that have 4 different groups attached to it. Let's say here we have the carbon here. Let's say this one is hydrogen, and this one is NH3, and this one is OH, and this one is, let's see, we have CH3. So look at it, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at this carbon, look at it very well. This carbon, does it have any group that is similar that bonded to it? Look at it very well. If you look at it, this is the carbon, and it has 4 different groups attached to it. Here is ammonia, here is OH group, and here is CH3, and here is free hydrogen. So a symmetric carbon or a chiral carbon is a carbon that have 4 different groups attached to it. So this is an example of, you can even call it alpha carbon. So it has many names. You can call it alpha carbon, you can call it alpha carbon, you can call it asymmetric carbon, you can call it chiral carbon, and you can call it stereogenic carbon. So you see, you have 4 different groups attached to this this carbon. So that is why you can call it stereogenic carbon, you can call it asymmetric carbon, you can call it chiral carbon, or you can call it alpha carbon. So all these you can call it as either of the 2. So the either of the 4. So now, what is stereogenic carbon? So it's when you have a compound that have the same molecular formula but different arrangement. And that is why I want you to understand that we have even different types of stereoisomer. But I want you to understand something. We have a ways of calculating the number of stereoisomers. So how do you calculate the number of stereoisomer? The number of stereoisomers. You use a formula. The formula is 2n. And the n means the number of chiral carbon. The number of chiral carbon. So if you allow me, I can now draw another structure of glucose, and from there you can see we can calculate the number of the stereogenic carbon. So let's do it and see. So now please look at this. This is glucose. So who can tell me how many stereogenic carbon do we have? How many chiral carbon do we have in glucose? This is glucose. So please, do we have? Let me number them. This is carbon 1. Let me number the carbon atoms. Let me say this is carbon 2, this is carbon 3, this is carbon 4, this is carbon 5, and this is carbon 6. So let me start with, is carbon 1 a chiral carbon? Is carbon 1 a chiral carbon? You answered with yes or no. Is carbon 1 a chiral carbon? I'm talking about the number of chiral carbon in glucose. So I want to start with carbon 1. Carbon 1 a chiral carbon? Yes or no? So carbon 1 is not a chiral carbon. Why is it that carbon 1 is not a chiral carbon? Is because look at the carbon. How many atoms carbon 1? You see here carbon bonds to oxygen, so you have 1. This carbon bonds to this carbon, meaning 2. Then this carbon bonds to hydrogen. So you see in this case, the first carbon, it has only 2 groups attached to it. So you see only 3 atoms attached to excellent, miracle, Ugochukwu, because it does not have 4 different groups. So it must bound to 4 different groups. So therefore, the carbon 1 here is not carbon. So now, let's move to carbon 2. So you see the carbon 2 here, this carbon bonded to OH group, and it also bound to hydrogen. So you see this one and this one, there are 2 different groups. And then this carbon is also bound directly to this carbon 2. And also this one is carbon that directly bound to this carbon. So now let me ask you, is carbon 2 a chiral carbon, non-chiral? Is carbon 2 a chiral carbon or non-chiral? Is carbon 2 a chiral carbon or a non-chiral carbon? So the truth is that it is chiral carbon. Why? Some of you will now say, this one is carbon and this one is carbon. But look at this. The carbon here, look at the atoms that bond to the carbon. This one, it bonds to oxygen and it bonds to hydrogen. But the carbon here, it bonds to hydrogen here, which is also similar with this. But here is oxygen and here is OH group. So you see, because the carbon here bound to different atoms that are not similar with the number of atoms attached to this carbon, that is what make this carbon a chiral carbon. And then now let's go to 3. This is OH, so this is hydrogen, and this is OH. So this carbon is bonded to this carbon, and it bonded to this carbon. So if you take this entirely, and if you take this entirely, is it the same? It's not the same. 1, 2, 3 carbon here. 1, 2. So you see this carbon 3, it is also a chiral carbon. And then if you take carbon 4, from the carbon 4 here, this one and this one is not also the same. So this one is chiral. In fact, this 5 is also a chiral. So it means that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 chiral carbon. And this carbon, the last carbon 6 here, you see the carbon here is bonded to hydrogen and another hydrogen. So this hydrogen and this hydrogen disqualify it. So therefore, we have 4 chiral carbons. So therefore, the N here in the case of glucose is equal to 4. So we have 2 power 4, which is 16, indicating that the glucose has 16 stereoisomers. It has 16 stereoisomers. So then the next thing, this isomerism or this stereoisomers is divided into 2. We have 2 types of stereoisomers. Number 1, we have enantiomers. Enantiomers. So enantiomers is a type of stereoisomerism which actually form a mirror image. They usually form mirror image. They are the types of isomers that form mirror image. They usually form images. So this is the first types of stereoisomers we have enantiomers, and then the next one we have distereoisomers. We have stereomers. So distereomers, they are non-mirror image. They don't form, they are non-mirror image. They are non-mirror image. So when you said enantiomers are examples of stereoisomers that they can form a mirror image. That if you look at them, they are the compound that they form a mirror image, but they cannot superimpose. But they cannot superimpose. They cannot superimpose. And then at the same time, these okay, you see, we say stereoisomers are divided into two. We have enantiomers and we have distereomers. So the distereomers, they are also divided into two. Please, are you following? Can you actually hear me? Please, can you hear me? Are you still with me? Please, are you with me before we continue? Because I just want to mention the different types of distereomers. Please, can you hear me? Are you with me? Okay. So now, so we said stereoisomers is divided into two. We have enantiomers and we have distereomers. So the distereomers, they are the isomers that doesn't form a mirror image. And then we have the types of distereomers. We have two types of distereomers. We have epimers and we have anomers. We have epimers and anomers. What is epimers? Epimers, as we can see, they are the types of they are distereomers. They are distereomers that differ in configuration around a single carbon or around a one carbon. Let me write around one carbon atom. So that is the epimers. So in the case of epimers, we have two types of distereomers. We have epimers and we have anomers. So epimers are the types of distereomers that they have different in terms of the configuration around a carbon atom. So let me actually show you a typical examples of epimers so that you can see it. Epimers. Examples of these epimers, we have glucose and galactose. So I'll show you examples of epimers. Nzeribe, maybe it's because you didn't watch the initial video. Did you watch the videos that I sent on carbohydrates? Okay. So now let me show you how you will understand Epimers. Okay, please, can you see this? Look at it here. Look at D-glucose and D-mannose, D-mannose and D-glucose. You see there are Epimers at carbon 2. There are Epimers at carbon 2. If you look at it at carbon 2 between D-mannose and D-glucose, it is only that there is only a change in OH group at carbon 2. Okay, I should zoom it. Okay, let me do that. Okay, let's look at it now very well. So look at it now. The D-mannose and D-glucose, if you look at it very well, at carbon 2, the glucose and the mannose and glucose, if you look at them, they are all the same. They have the same thing. The only difference between the D-mannose and the D-glucose is at carbon 2, the change in the orientation of OH group. And look at it between D-glucose and D-galactose. It is only, the change is only at carbon 4. That is why they are called C4 epimers, because that is why we say it's deeper in configuration around one carbon atom. So the only thing that makes them different is at one carbon atom. So if you look at it, the difference in configuration between the D-glucose and D-mannose, you see that the difference is only at carbon 2. And then if you look at the D-glucose and D-galactose, the only difference is at carbon 4. So it's only the change or differ in configuration around one carbon atom. That is what we call Epimers, ladies and gentlemen. So the next thing is, if you understand the Epimers, then the next one is anomers. So anomers, it only apply in a cyclic carbohydrates. It only apply, the anomers, it only apply in cyclic carbohydrates. It only apply in cyclic carbohydrates. Cyclic carbohydrates. That is those carbohydrates that is in cyclic form. So let me share it now. Hello? So let me share the anomers. So now look at the anomers very well. Okay, so let me share it again. So now the next one that we are going to look at is anomers. So look at it. We have anomeric carbon. Look at the anomeric carbon. So anomeric carbon, it is like the carbonyl carbon. Remember, I show you how the glucose look like. So the functional group of either the glucose and fructose, remember there is a carbonyl carbon. So that carbonyl carbon, when it forms a ring, like this, so that carbon is called anomeric carbon. Anomeric carbon. So you see, what is the difference in configuration? So the glucose there, it is not longer called as normal glucose, rather it is called D-glucopyranose. Look at it very well. D-glucopyranose. So it is called D-glucopyranose because it is in cyclic form. And what makes them alpha and beta? Look at it. Look at the carbon 1 of these two compounds. Look at the carbon 1. The OH is pointing downward. That is why it is called alpha carbon, because at the anomeric carbon, the OH is pointing downward. But in the case of beta D-glucopyranose, the OH is pointing up. So that is why it is called beta. So that is what happened in the case of anomers. So in the case of anomers, they are only different in configuration at anomeric carbon. The only difference, if you look at it between alpha D-glucopyranose and beta D-glucopyranose, is only the change in the orientation of OH group at the anomeric carbon. Please do now understand the anomers, that is anomerism. It applies when there is only a change in configuration of OH group around around anomeric carbon. So the one pointing downward is alpha, and then the one pointing upward, it is called beta. So these are the difference between alpha and beta D-glucose. Ladies and gentlemen, a similar questions like this was asked in the last year question paper. The similar questions like this were asked in the last year question paper. So ladies and gentlemen, we now talk about the different types of isomerism. We said in carbohydrates, we have stereoisomerism, and the stereoisomerism is divided into two. We have enantiomers, we have distereomers, and then the distereomers is divided into epimers and anomers. Then epimers is when you have a different in configuration around only one carbon atom, and that is the only difference that apply in D-glucose and D-galactose. So sometimes you might be asked to give an examples of anomers. So glucose and mannose, there are epimers at carbon 2. Then glucose and galactose, there are epimers at carbon 4. Okay. So now let me continue sharing the question paper. Sorry, the questions. So you see now a compound having the same structural formula but different in spatial configuration, it is called stereoisomers. So now let's look at so in polysaccharide, monosaccharide unit are joined by, so which types of bond is used in joint the two monosaccharides to form polysaccharide? Please, what is the answer? Let's look at it now very well. Polysaccharides, the monosaccharide unit are joined by a peptide bond. Okay, you can't see anything. Let me share it again. So can you see the question now? Question 6. Can you see the question now? Hello, can you see the question? Peptide, B glucose bond, C glycosidic bond, and D covalent bond. What is the answer, please? Okay, question 6 is C. Yes, the answer is glycosidic bond. So it's a bond that joins monosaccharide to produce a polysaccharide. So the answer is C, correct. So now let's look at another question. That is question 7. So now question 6. Can you see this? Can you see the question? Question 7 says sucrose is A monosaccharide, B disaccharide, C polysaccharide, and D triose. What is the answer for question 7, please? What is the answer for question 7? Excellent. So the answer is question 7. Sucrose is an example of disaccharide. So we know that sucrose is an example of disaccharides, and it is made up of glucose and fructose. It is made up by glucose and fructose. So sucrose is a disaccharide that made up of glucose and fructose. So the answer is B. Correct. So now let's move to question 8. Question 8. A disaccharide that consists of A, galactose and fructose, B, glucose and galactose, C, glucose and sucrose, D, glucose and ribose. So what is the answer to question 8, please? The answer to question 8. A lactose is a disaccharide that made up of what and what? Lactose is made up of which and which sugar? Question 8. Okay, glucose and galactose. Excellent. So it is made up of glucose and galactose. So the answer is glucose and galactose. So the answer is B, glucose and galactose. So now let's move to question 9. Question 9. Starch consists of unbranched amylose and branch amylopectin. Starch, question 9, starch consists of A, unbranched amylose and branch amylopectin, B, branch amylose and branch amylopectin, C, unbranched amylose and unbranched amylopectin, D, none of the above. So what is the answer? Starch is made up of what and what? It consists of what and what? Question 9. Let me see your answer before I answer it. Question 9. Question 9. What is the answer? Question 9. Okay. So since you don't have the answer, starch is made up of amylose and amylopectin. Okay, let me share the question again. The question says starch consists of A, on-branch amylose and branch amylopectin, B, branch amylose and branch amylopectin, C, on-branch amylose and on. It is amylose and amylopectin, but which one is branch and which one is on-branch? Amylose, it is on-branch, it doesn't have branch, and it is made up of alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond. So it is actually made of in glycosidic bond. So it is linear, it is on-branch. While amylopectin, it is branch and linear at the same time. So the branch point of amylopectin is usually formed at alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. So the branching point of amylopectin is formed at alpha 1,6 glycosidic of amylopectin is alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond. So it means that even the amylopectin, it is at some point it is a linear and it also forms a branch. So therefore the answer is starch is made up of on-branch amylose and branch amylopectin. So the answer is A for the question 9. The answer is A. So let's move to question 10. Question 10, which of the following is not a reducing sugar? Which of the following is not a reducing sugar? Which of them is not a reducing sugar? So now the question is, what is a reducing sugar? A reducing sugar is a sugar that have free aldehyde or ketones. Reducing sugars are sugars, generally the sugars that have free aldehydes or ketone functional group. So all monosaccharides are reducing. All monosaccharides are reducing sugar. So if you look at it even from this, glucose is a reducing sugar. Galactose is a reducing sugar. So question 10 is D. Sucrose is an example of non-reducing sugar. Lactose is lactose is a reducing sugar. And also maltose is a reducing sugar. So therefore the answer to question 10 is D. Can we stop here or we can continue? Can we stop or we should continue? Because it is exactly 10. Please, can we continue answering or we should stop here? Please, can we stop here or we should continue? I wanted to see your response. How many of you want us to stop or we should continue? Okay. Yes, 11 is C. Okay, so no problem. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope you all enjoy. We are doing all this so that to make everything simple so that you can easily pass your exam.